I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
We are back in the TARDIS, continuing our 60th anniversary retrospective on Doctor Who, and we have reached the Sixth Doctor, Colin Baker.
Yep.
Colin and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, as I call it.
Yeah.
I'm going to be real. I did not want to do a television episode of the Sixth Doctor. I really wanted to do an audio adventure, but I got overruled. We are no audio adventures for this retrospective. It all have to be television episodes. So you know what we're doing when we get to the Eighth Doctor. Spoilers. The era of the Sixth Doctor got a lot of hate. There were a lot of people who did not like the actor, Colin Baker. There were people who did not like the stories. There were people who felt that Doctor Who had passed its prime. We are 22 years into Doctor Who's existence. And there are people who say maybe it's time for it to go away. Maybe Doctor Who has had its time. Especially when we're in a situation where we're in a post-Star Wars world, where now everything science fiction related is getting compared to Star Wars. And there was no way on a BBC budget that Doctor Who could do anything like Star Wars. No offense.
Yeah, but also this was, we're right into the, Colin Baker, he comes in 84.
Yeah, they ended the last season right after, the regeneration of Davison to Baker was not even the final episode. They decided to extend that season and have one adventure with Colin Baker. So you didn't even get any chance to mourn the loss if you were a Fifth Doctor fan, because the very next week, here's Colin Baker's first episode.
Yeah, and I mean, not being old enough or in Britain enough at the time of the regeneration, I can't really speak to how that played to the fans, or if that was really as much of a hype train as the current ones are, Like I said last time, regenerations now are like this huge event, for months that it's coming, and when it's gonna happen, and you get to have your who the next person's gonna be, and you get to have all your friends around, or go to a actual movie theater for a fan gathering or something, I have the feeling that if you really liked Peter Davison, and a lot of people did, that there was none of that. It was just like, well, that guy's gone. Here's a new person.
I mean, David Tennant still says that was his doctor, and now that's his father-in-law.
Yeah. It was just kind of like, shuffle that guy out of the TARDIS. Here's the new guy in the TARDIS, is kind of the feeling, even when you watch the repeats. Now, when you watch the old stuff, you just kind of get the feeling that the show itself didn't really care.
Yeah.
This was interesting because this was the first time they pulled an actor that had been on the show before to be the Doctor.
Wouldn't be the last. Hi, Peter.
Wouldn't be the last. Yeah. Yeah, Peter Capaldi would be the next time they would do that. But the thing is that, you know, Colin Baker had a few kind of guest spots. I think more than one.
The one that really sticks out was Arc of Infinity, where he played Commander Maxwell. And that was a Fifth Doctor story. And Baker originally didn't want to play that because he felt that, well, if I'm playing a character in a Doctor Who story, then that means I'm never going to play the Doctor, which was his dream role. And then his agent said, really? You think they're going to have you play the Doctor? Take this role, dude. Boy, did that change.
Yeah. I mean, keep the dream alive. But I think that was probably in Capaldi's mind too, but he was just like, hey, you know, at least I get to be on the show. When Colin stepped in, I think they went so far into the goofiness of the Doctor with the look and the dialogue a bit.
They wanted to bring more of the alien back to the Doctor, from my understanding. That during the Davidson era, the Doctor had become too human, and they wanted to make him a little bit more alien. So to have him be a little bit more cold, a little bit more distant, a little bit more erratic with Colin Baker's performance, which ended up not being very popular. Honestly, they didn't like the idea of this cold, uncaring Doctor. Felt it was undoctor-like.
Yeah, and as we get into the plot of this, I think we'll end up talking more about that.
So it's always funny how Baker actually got the role, because yeah, he was in Arc of Infinity, but it wasn't until, amazingly enough, a wedding. Both Colin Baker and producer, the showrunner, John Nathan Turner, we have mentioned him before, both attended the wedding of a mutual colleague. And it was at this wedding that Nathan Turner kind of noticed Baker had a very commanding presence, an aura, he was like the center of attention kind of guy, and he felt that guy should be my next Doctor. No auditions, no discussions with the BBC, no discussions with the script editor, Eric Sayward. And that kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. That Nathan Turner had no discussions with anyone associated with the show, just said, Colin Baker's the new Doctor. And Eric Sayward didn't want Colin Baker to be the Doctor, mostly because he had no say-so in who the actor was, but also felt that Baker was wrong for the Doctor. And the BBC, again, they're the network airing this show. It's their property, and they're not involved with the casting of the lead of their show. But JNT is going to JNT, apparently.
Yeah.
And this was also kind of a shocker for longtime viewers of the BBC, because Colin Baker, no stranger to anyone who was watching the BBC, but he had prominently played villains or villainous characters in his performances on BBC television. So for all of a sudden, for him to play the Doctor, the main character, the hero of the story, was sort of a culture shock.
I mean, to be honest, that would kind of happen again once we get to the Ninth Doctor.
Yes.
You know, because every time that I had seen, I mean, I think we talked about that when we had talked about 28 Days Later, you know. But that was kind of the turnabout with the casting of the Ninth Doctor, is that the actor had been known mostly for kind of darker roles. But then again, it kind of worked because you're coming off that war storyline which they introduced.
Mm-hmm.
So it did explain why suddenly there's this darker nature to the Doctor, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So at least in that sense, you do have like, okay, 9 is a bit different, and we'll accept that.
A lot of PTSD from the war.
Yeah.
Speaking of, let's talk about the costume. The green shoes, the yellow trousers, the patchwork coat, the little kitty cat little pin on his lapel. All came from the mind of John Nathan Turner himself. This was the complete opposite of what Colin Baker wanted. Colin Baker wanted sort of a black velvety look to kind of reflect this new darker persona that Colin Baker wanted to use for the Doctor. Years later, he would say that if he had his choice, he would choose something very much like Christopher Eccleston's outfit for his incarnation of the Doctor. But he didn't have a say in what he got to wear, which he is one of the few Doctors that did not have a say. Most Doctors had a bit of a say-so in what their outfit is because, they're wearing it every day. But Colin didn't get that opportunity, which is kind of sad. Now they would change it for the extended universe. He would. I don't know if you ever saw that light blue coat, Sixth Doctor, which is somewhat better.
Yeah.
I do like the blue coat version of that Doctor more, but we get what we get in the TV show. And many have suggested that this was kind of reflective of John Nathan Turner's own personality and fashion sense, because Nathan Turner was always wearing these very loud and colorful Hawaiian shirts, kind of to make sure that he was the center of attention in any room he was in. And I guess he felt that was what he wanted to reflect in the Doctor. He's wearing these colorful rainbow outfits to kind of get all eyes on him, which does reflect with the ego this Doctor has. He's the only Doctor to ever look in the mirror and say something positive about his look. Look at that regal brow. Look at that distinguished chin. I'm gorgeous.
Yeah.
And every other Doctor was like, oh, look at these ears. Oh, look at that nose. Oh, man, I'm short. So it's like, he's the only, this Doctor has even more of an ego than the regular Doctor would have. Also at this point, there was a lot of public backlash against the Doctor for a different reason, as parent groups. Parent groups wasn't just a new thing. Parent groups were kind of going against the show and the BBC, saying that Doctor Who had gotten too violent. Now, Doctor Who is an adventure show. There is action. There is battles between good and evil. So there's going to be a few fights. But looking at the Sixth Doctor era, you can kind of understand where they're coming from, especially this episode.
This episode was also Doctor Who's commentary, in a way, on the moral panic.
So now we get to talk about the real reason we wanted to talk about this episode. Back then, they had what was called the video nasties. So this was right at the beginning of where videotapes and videotape players were becoming more affordable for families. More and more families were getting the videotape players. There were really no regulations on home video back then. So it was kind of the Wild West in video stores. Any studio could release anything that they made on home video, and there was no restrictions. There was no rating system. you would get bloody, gory horror movies or adult movies or whatever, and there was no restrictions, no censorship. You can release whatever you want. And that got that moral panic going because, well, we need a system in place to regulate this stuff. And we see if, as children are watching these violent movies, they're going to become violent themselves. The same things they talk about today.
Well, so here's what happened in the UK that didn't really happen in America. We had a very similar, of course, moral panic in America, and we've talked about it before when we talked about the film rating system and how it changed in the 80s as well and all that kind of stuff. But in the UK, they've done these things through acts of parliament. We've always done rating systems through voluntary acts of the film industry. So there have been congressional hearings over here, but they've more or less led to the Motion Picture Association of America, which is now just the Motion Picture Association, putting in various self-regulation standards so that Congress would not pass censorship laws. So that's where we get all our G, PG, PG-13, all that stuff. In the UK, it's a bit more strictly regulated, and they have actual parliamentary regulations, but they do have a non-government organization that's called the British Board Film Classification System. Okay, so they started out with that classification system much like the US did. Like, we'll regulate ourselves so that you don't pass a law. But when videos came out and all the video nasty stuff happened, what was going on was when videos came out, things were being released that had never been brought before the Board of Film Classification. So you were able to get stuff that was not technically classified under their classification laws and their classification system. So there were all these uncensored videos, and those uncensored videos were the ones that got labeled the video nasties. And they were all these really extreme, mostly Eastern European horror films, which also caused a big stir in the US, and are legendary in the horror community. And there's all these, like, stories of how they were made, and, most of them are just for hype. But a lot of adult material as well. And so then in 1984, Parliament passed a separate law that required videos to be put under the same rating system. The only problem is that Video Recordings Act meant that there was a stricter rating system on videos than there was on films. And that meant that a lot of stuff that was able to be put on film had to be re-edited to be allowed to be put on video. And it was a real mess for a long time, and it wasn't until, like, I don't know, the early 2000s or something that they finally were able to get another act through Parliament that was like, once you're rated on film, that rating stands for when you're put out on, like, home release. So yeah, it was a real mess for a long time because of this weird loophole in British law about the rating system. And this episode that we're talking about comes out in January of 85, when this whole system has just been passed. It's not yet fully enacted. People don't know which way it's going to land. There's still all this nonsense about, well, now we can't put films that are already out on video because they're getting new ratings and stuff, and so it's just absolute anarchy in the UK. Ha ha ha. But yeah. And you've got this woman named Mary Whitehouse, who's, we've talked about before, still going around screaming about, the moral indecency of BBC programming, including Doctor Who, which was one of her favorite targets at the time. It was, this was BBC, or the creators, producers of Doctor Who at the time, trying to get their own back, I guess, and say something moral about the, like, hey, we are also concerned about violence on children's television, and we're going to prove that by putting out what everybody considers one of the most violent episodes of Doctor Who in the classic era.
But also, the episode on some level is kind of a commentary on Doctor Who itself. How, oh, it's a monster. No, it's just a couple of lights in a dark room. Have we gone down this hallway before?
Yeah, it's a really interesting commentary on, maybe you're making too much out of this in a very interesting way.
Yeah, so let's pick up where we left off, and that would have been the regeneration of Peter Davison into Colin Baker. And really, that's all we need to do, because this is just a few episodes later. So Perry is still here. We still have Nicola Bryant's very questionable American accent.
And very low-cut tops and all.
And booty shorts.
And booty shorts now, yeah. She's got the booty shorts on.
Because as we mentioned in our last Doctor Who episode, she's there for the dads. She's there for the older fans to not sound perverted, but she's there to ogle at, because she's an attractive woman.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned it last time, but this is where they got the idea for a lot of Rose's clothing when she came in with the Ninth Doctor.
Yep.
So,
also we have a bit of a different thing, because this season they tried to do something a little bit different, in that we are no longer dealing with half-hour-long episodes. This season introduces an hour-long format, which you think they try to condense the Doctor Who stories. Oh no, this is just a slow-paced, it's just a 30-minute episode kind of stretched to 44 minutes.
Well, I gotta say, I'm liking this format better, because this is a 2-part episode. It's a longer individual episode, but it's a 2-parter, and honestly, isn't this kind of what we were saying we wanted in most of the other episodes?
Yeah, and they would, granted, this was not popular at the era. This is what led to lower ratings, because I guess the audience for 22 years had been conditioned to half-hour Doctor Who episodes to all of a sudden have hour-long episodes. I guess they just didn't plan for that. And
hey guys, when you go back and binge them, yeah, you're gonna realize that this was the better move.
I mean, it's what they use now.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it's probably less egregious if you're coming home, throwing it on for 30 minutes, and then wandering off and doing the dishes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have to sit there and binge that entire storyline for like 3 hours or whatever we were doing with those like 6-episode ones,
yeah,
it is brutal in the looking back, you know?
Yeah.
It's like when you're reading Dickens or something and you have to read it as a novel now and you're like, "Oh, why is every chapter starting with 3 paragraphs of reminding you what happened in the chapter you just read?" And then you remembered that 1, he was paid by the word, and 2, these were serialized in like monthly installments in some magazine or newspaper or whatever, so you had to get the readers back up to speed on what they read like a month ago, or bring in new readers who missed the last chapter or whatever, you know? And when you sit there and read it as a novel, you're like, oh my goodness, just cut this out. And some of them do, you know, some of them edit for like clarity and stuff like that. Watching old Doctor Who is very much like that. It's like, I don't need this recap. I just watched this.
Yeah, when each episode replays the last 5 minutes of the previous episode.
Yeah, you kind of want it to be like, oh, please edit this out.
And there are some that do. I mean, there was a point, at least when Doctor Who was originally airing on PBS in America, that they would edit these into a movie format, editing out the previously on and the credits, so it kind of flows more as one viewing. And
then the purists were like, no, that's not how you watch Doctor Who. And then it's like, oh, shut up. Yeah. These are better. Trust me, these are better.
I'm glad on the season Blu-ray sets they give you that option.
Yeah, that is true.
So, where are we? We are in deep space because the TARDIS is borked.
I don't think the TARDIS is borked. I think the TARDIS is just bored. The TARDIS is like, you know what? I'm going to take a nap. We're stopping here for a bit. This is a nice, quiet part of space.
There's nothing. They're in deep space. They can't move. They can't do anything. They're trying to figure out what's wrong. We get the. I don't know if this is the first appearance of it, but I would think that the TARDIS manual would be bigger than that, because Perry finds the TARDIS manual to try to figure out what's wrong with the TARDIS, and the Doctor says, "Well, you know, I don't need the man. I've read through that hundreds of times. I already know what's wrong with the machine." He's
a liar.
He's never read that manual.
Yeah, there is no version of the Doctor that has ever read the TARDIS manual. Maybe Susan read the TARDIS manual. She seems like the type.
She needs a light read every now and then.
Yeah, but the Doctor has never read that manual. I would bet money on it.
So they figure out that in order to get the doohickey to do the whatsits, they need a special element that can only be found on one planet.
So off to that planet we're going.
That is like 20 minutes of the Doctor and Perry standing around doing nothing.
Yeah.
Before they figure out, we need to go to the planet to get the thing to make the doohickey do the whatsits. Classic Doctor Who.
We're eating up time, ladies and gentlemen, and all in between. There's so much of this episode is eating up time. But just as we've got Perry there for everyone who wants to ogle women, we've got some eye candy for everybody who wants to ogle them some men in this one.
Yeah, we got a shirtless man getting tortured for entertainment purposes because this is being broadcast on television on Varos.
And it's not just any man. This is the shirtless son of Sean Connery.
Oh.
Yes, this is Jason Connery. And we will find out later, is the leader of some group of rebels that is trying to break free of this authoritarian government here on Varos, and him and his wife are trying to get away, but he's the current entertainment torture subject on Varos TV.
So yeah,
the only form of entertainment on Varos.
Yeah, the only form of entertainment is torturing prisoners for people's entertainment. This is sort of a precursor to reality television, because the audience at home gets to vote on things. And each television is equipped with a yes or no voting button. You get to vote on pretty much anything, because the government of Varos simply has a governor, and like there's no Congress, there's no parliament. It's just a sitting governor, and then he dictates his plans to fix the problems of the planet, and then the people get to decide, do we go with it, or if we don't. An example in the show, he talks about that there isn't enough money to get food rations for everybody, so he asks the people, would you rather lower your food rations and have food for later, or would you have a full meal now and potentially starve tomorrow? And the planet unanimously votes, we eat now. That is a problem for future me.
Yeah, and the thing is that the prisoners are not the only one tortured. The governor is also tortured if the vote does not go his way. And depending on how strong the governor is in mind and body, that tells you how many votes he can eventually lose before he finally gives up and dies.
We get these two characters that really do nothing in this show, that are just watching the television, our look at Varosian society. These two, I assume, husband and wife that have varying different political views.
Okay, I want to just stop right now, because this is something that will only make sense to any listeners who are either English or are up on like British TV or whatever. Doctor Who predicted Gogglebox, and we need to be respectful of that, or either terrified of that, depending on how much you enjoy the idea of Gogglebox. And for those in the American audience who don't understand the reference, there is a reality TV show in the UK, which I don't know if it's still going on, but it's called Gogglebox, and all it is you watch people watching TV. It's kind of like Talk Soup, except instead of a comedian making jokes about things, it's just normal people.
MST3K without the professional comedy?
Well, it's really more like a reaction YouTuber or Twitch streamer.
Without the comedy?
Yeah, no, I mean, it really is. Like, there's just no the comedy value is just watching other people occasionally make funny comments accidentally. Like, they're not intentionally trying to be humorous, but sometimes they are. But it's just, they pull normal, everyday average people. Like, they're not celebrities, they're not professional comedians or anything. It's just supposed to be a random sampling of the British public and what they think about television, and then they show them clips from television, and they like edit the most unintentionally funny bits. So they just put cameras in their house and they record them watching television, and then they edit it together into whatever happens to be interesting.
So yeah, the husband and wife, I assume, have varying different political views. One is very pro the current governor and one is very anti the current governor. In fact, the husband is cheering on the presumed death of this governor.
Yeah, and the wife is cheering on the husband is just, I don't really think he's anti the governor so much as he's just very pro-death. Like, he wants to see the death of the rebel, and, you know, when the Doctor and Perry get mixed up in it, he's very much like, yeah, you know, whatever happens to them, I'll be happy to see it. He just wants to see violence.
He does make a comment that there hasn't been a good, decent execution on television for a while.
Yeah, so he just seems very bloodthirsty. And I think he's kind of just apolitical. He just wants to, like, go to work, come home, eat a meal,
and see someone die.
And see somebody die on television. Like, he's very much the bread and circuses kind of guy. So I don't think he's very political about it. The wife is very much pro the government. She's doing her reports. She's following the rules. She's very, you know, like, he constantly wants to break the rules because it's easier for him.
She's willing to throw her husband under the bus for breaking the rules. Say, hey, voting is mandatory. If you don't vote, I'm gonna tell on you. And later in the episode where he uses her voting box, he says, what you did is illegal. I'm gonna tell them that you used my voting box. That's illegal.
Even though she knows it could get him killed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's very dutifully filling out these, like, long reports that we as the audience know, and obviously her husband knows as well. They don't mean anything. They don't do anything. They don't serve any purpose. But she's sitting there dutifully, and we know that she's, like, telling on her husband because he asks, like, am I in the report? And then he gets scared because he knows that if she tells on him, he could be the next one on the TV.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So she's very much a supporter of the system, even though she admits this governor is the worst governor since the last governor and the governor before him. She admits that all the rulers are exactly the same. And we find out why.
Yeah, we'll skip ahead here. How the governors are chosen is very odd. So when a governor dies, they take the 12 highest ranking officials in their military, government, whatever, and just draw a name. Whatever name is drawn, you're the new governor.
And the governor says that you just do whatever you can to placate the people enough to prolong your own life.
Yeah, being a governor, they know this is a death sentence. It's just how long can you stay the execution? And even the governor in this story says the things that need to be done to make this planet a better place are not popular decisions. So anyone that announces these ideas are going to die because the people
will vote against it.
Yeah, even if it is in their own best interests. I mean, we've got people that will vote against their own best interest because it slightly inconveniences them. Who says Doctor Who isn't political?
Yeah. And there's no way, because everything is up to the immediate public vote, and you die if it doesn't go your way immediately. And the only way to convince people is a very short, like 20-30 second speech. And they can start voting at any time. Then there's never any way of convincing people. But the thing is that you see that the rebel leader, played by Jason Connery, he thinks that he's discovered that the people in charge, like the governor and whatever, live in luxury while the rest of them starve. And we find out that that's kind of only partially true, because they do get more food and they do get slightly more luxurious quarters, but they're under constant threat of death, because as soon as the governor dies, their name is in the pot to be the next governor. And it's just voting and torture until they die. In fact, the one guy, there's the subplot where one of the guards is helping him, and the wife of the rebel leader, Areta, who becomes friends with Perry over the course of the story, she asks this officer guy, like, hey, didn't you used to be on our side? What happened? And he was like, well, circumstances change. And you find out over the course of the story, he's now one of the people in line to become governor. And so now he's just as scared as everybody else, because he's moved up in the line. Mm-hmm. Into this, like, it's not just about, like, oh, I can escape, or he now knows that it's not true. That, like, what the rebels are fighting for is not actually true. And it turns out that, like, all of them are on this weird prison planet.
That's another
that got forgotten about, and it's just this perpetual prison state that's just kind of accidentally been left there.
An entire planet that originally started as a prison colony. I'm sure there's a nation that started as a prison colony and was still under the rules and regulations of their prisoners, which Australia?
Yeah. Well, the thing is that there's also, the big thing about this episode is it ends up being the way the Doctor ends up freeing the planet is not the typical way that most of these stories go. And it's really the only interesting twist in this story, because normally the story would have the Doctor and the companion end up on a planet where there's an authoritarian government and a group of rebels, and then the Doctor just has to help the rebels. But it turns out that the thing the rebels are fighting for is not actually true, because they just want to take over the government. But the problem is that there's no real government to take over, because the planet is kind of stuck in a closed loop. But it turns out that there's this one guy that's actually there as a representative of a mining corporation from off-world that has been saying, like, well, you've got this ore. If you want, I'll buy this worthless ore from you, and it'll help you buy, like, a little bit of food rations, but, mostly the ore is worthless, and I'm being really nice to you from buying it.
When the Doctor pretty much says, my ship runs on this ore is very precious. This ore is worth a lot. It's worth a lot more than this creature, Syl, is paying you. And the moment you guys realize that, your whole system will change. And it does. In fact, Syl is so hell-bent on getting this ore that he's willing to call his own government to invade the planet just to get this ore. That's how much his people need it.
Yeah, and it turns out that the government of Syl's planet is like, that's like a lot of military expense and time and stuff. We're actually just floating in cash up here. Why don't you just pay them more money? And that gives his whole game away, because it's intercepted by the governor of the of Varos, and it proves that the doctor's telling the truth.
The doctor realizes that he has the government's trust when they decide to turn off the cameras before his execution.
Yeah.
If it was a real execution, you would broadcast that.
Yeah. And it turns out that the other thing they start exporting is the recordings of the executions. Because it turns out that there are other planets who want to see that sort of brutality as entertainment, including Sill's planet, wherever he's from, which is another bit of commentary,
I gotta say, for all the issues in this episode, I will say this probably has one of the best cliffhanger endings in classic Doctor Who, because a lot of the traps are just illusions that alter the mind. So there's the part where the Doctor, they turn up the heat in the area, they put a projection of a desert, so the Doctor believes that he is in a desert and he is, he's parched.
He's out of water and he is about to die of thirst, and yeah.
And then you hear the governor, and we're gonna cut in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, it's a really cool way to bring what's going on in the show with the kind of meta thing on the outside of the show, which is great. Because they're waiting for the exact moment of death and the tension building and everything. And then, of course, it's the exact same thing that the audience on Varos and the audience at home are kind of the same audience at that moment. But then, of course, part 2 starts with what most people consider one of the most horrible things in classic Who.
And what a lot of people have their big complaint about Colin Baker's Doctor, that a undoctor-like act. So when anyone is killed on this planet, they dispose of the body by dropping the body in acid. Saves on burial, I suppose. So they've dumped one body into the acid, and they're about to drop the Doctor's body, but it turns out he's been playing possum. He's not actually dead. He just sits up like the Undertaker, and that seemingly scares one of the guards to fall into this pool of acid. And then the other guard is trying to fight the Doctor. He's using the gurney as a shield. Now, many people have complained that the Doctor actually pushes the guard into the pool of acid. But if you actually pay attention, you see the first guard actually reach up, grab the other guard, and pull him in. But for a long time, people were complaining that the Doctor basically murdered someone in a very undoctor-like act.
Yeah, the thing is that the Doctor does not try to save the guard, because what happens is the first guard tries to get out of the acid basically by trying to reach up and grab the first guard. And because that guard is trying to fight the Doctor, he's off balance and falls back into the, Of course, it's Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who fight choreography, so it basically just looks like the other guy pulls him in, because they don't really work on the fight choreography. They're just like, hey, we need you to fall into that, and but the other guy will grab you when it's time to fall in, so,
What really gets people, though, is this very undoctor-like action movie quote that the Doctor uses after both of them fall into the pool of acid. He grabs his coat, looks at the two disintegrating people in this acid, and says, "Forgive me if I don't join you."
Yeah, it's much more of a James Bond line than it is a Doctor Who line, You really want the Doctor to be shocked by the gruesomeness or attempt to help, or, in the David Tennant era, that would be an "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry" line.
Yeah.
That would have been a fighting to try to keep the second guy alive or something,
We get that very smug look and that one-liner.
Yeah, he's like, well, that's what you get for trying to dunk me in acid. Haha, you know. And I get it, like, okay, they're part of this, like, horrible authoritarian government, and they're probably responsible in some way for the deaths of who knows how many people. But at the same time, they're sentient beings, you know?
They're still people.
Yeah, they're still people there. And, it's not a good look, you know? And yeah, that really bothered me too when I was watching this episode. I was like, "Oh, yeah, no, I do not want my doctor to to do or say things like that." You
That's
know, I
why
want him to realize what's like, yes, you will fight for your life or to save the lives of others, and sometimes death occurs in that situation. But if you have the opportunity to save a life, you generally will. Like that's the doctor.
there's this weird story. There's this weird beat where the wife, the rebellion leader's wife, and Perry are captured, and they get turned into animal hybrids, which goes nowhere.
It is a very strange side project because they wanted to have a mad scientist plot in the middle of this, and I don't think it was necessary.
No, it's just wasting time.
Yeah, it is just filling up time, and his thing was that he was, you know, the mad scientist was experimenting on people and turning them into creatures that would dig or faster. You know, because they are a mine. They're a mining colony.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would change people into animal hybrids that could dig or move or faster. Because apparently that was better than creating machines that would do that. Like, you know, I mean, moles are really efficient diggers, but what's even a more efficient digger than that is a drill, you know?
Yeah.
So, I don't really know why he was doing that other than I am a mad scientist in a sci-fi show. But yeah, and then the doctor kind of comes in to free them, and he's like, you know, give us the antidote for whatever you've done. And he's like, oh yeah, there is no antidote. It's just all in their minds. They just have to be worthy of being human again.
And we get a thing that we've seen other doctors do is, yes, the doctor is brandishing a gun and he is pointing it to someone in a very threatening way. But he does do something we've seen other doctors do, is take the gun and shoot the machine to destroy it. I mean, David Tennant's doctor did that in his very last episode.
Yeah, I mean that's fine. Like, you know, as long as the machine isn't sentient, it's he's kind of like, well, you know, it's just machinery. Let's blow it up.
Yeah, because, you know, the mad scientist says, hey, pick a switch, see if it'll turn it off. And then the rebel leader said, which button is it, doctor? Which button is it? All of them. Bring, 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 bring.
Yeah. Let's blow it up and hope for the best.
And it works. They're able to get there, and they try to remind, you know, the doctor says, you know, remind them of who they used to be, and they'll turn back to who they used to be. You're Perry Brown. You're my friend. Perry? Yes, I'm Perry. Who are you? I'm the doctor. Doctor. Yes, the doctor.
And I love the other guy, instead of being like, you know, you're my wife, we've been together, we have children or whatever. He's just like, wake up, we gotta go. It's like, no, you don't get any characterization. You just get me yelling at you that we need to run. We'll worry about your mental sanity later.
And we get another, you know, let's take the mask off the mad scientist to reveal a grotesque face like we had in the last Doctor Who episode we talked about.
Yeah, that the whole thing is pointless, and it's just, I think they just wanted to glue feathers on Nicola Bryant. Like, it's just, okay. And they have this weird little line about, like, well, they turn into whatever animal they feel is, like, deep inside them because they don't feel worthy of being a human anymore. So I guess she wants to fly away from all of her problems like a bird. And I'm like, okay, thanks, Dr. Freud. Like, go away. What is this? This is so stupid.
And yes, this does, even though it is an hour-long episode, it's still pacing itself like it's 2 half-hour episodes, which is annoying because characters will constantly escape and get captured and escape and get captured and escape and get captured. It is annoying.
And then there is the weird death by tendril later where, like, they just, like, toss some leftover vines from the set decoration department.
Yeah, they see a dead body and they see this rash on their neck, and they don't know where it comes from. Turns out there are these vines that are growing in the in the air ducts of this place that if it touches you, you will die.
And the doctor's immediately like, move through them and don't let the tendrils touch you. And then they make the guards get hit with the tendrils or something. And, like, I don't know.
It's like poison ivy, something like that, Perry.
Sure, it's not like that at all in any way, shape, or form, but don't you worry your pretty little head about it.
The outfits they have for the Varosian guards are, it's black and red, and you know what the symbolism is.
It's fascist chic, you know it.
Yeah, so there's one bald guy that's kind of Syl's
Pinchman.
Pick me, I would say pick me. He Syl's pick me, that he's trying to, because he wants to be the governor, and so he can work with Syl, and they can have all the money and all the power together and screw the populace.
I mean, does he not realize how governor on this planet works? Everybody else seems to, like, nobody else wants to be governor except for this one guy, and I guess he just doesn't realize how it works, like.
I think it's more of he's just going to give the people whatever they want, regardless. Like, the people want an execution today. Oh, fine, we'll execute somebody. The people want this. Okay, I'll say whatever they want to say, and I'll do whatever I want anyway. You know, like a politician does.
The people want cake every day. Fine, I'll give them that. Oh, wait, this planet doesn't have cake. Like, you know?
He makes the speech, this bald guy makes the speech saying, hey, our governor is weak. Our governor hasn't done anything for us. We're going to have one last vote, and you are going to vote whether the governor lives or dies. The governor even says, there's nothing I can say that will change your mind about me either way. So just do whatever you feel is right. And Perry's right there. What can I do? Nothing. It's not your call. Obviously, the vote's off or no, and he's trying to die. And this is where the other guy we talked about kind of had this change of heart and shoots the laser that's killing him, and they try to make their escape. And again, they escape, they get captured, they escape, they get captured, they escape, they get captured, because this is still a classic Doctor Who episode.
And then we end up at the scene where everybody thought it was also a little much for Doctor Who, which is that they try to execute the Doctor and Jason Connery by hanging them. Like, they just have a gallows. It's not anything sci-fi or weird or anything. It's a gallows. And they actually do end up pulling the lever, but the other end of the rope is not connected to anything, so they just fall through, and it doesn't actually do anything except just drop them through the floor, and they're fine.
Yeah.
But it was all for show for the little, worm alien that works for the mining corporation or whatever, and it was just to get him to give up his side of things, where he was like, no, if you won't buy the ore from me, I'll invade your planet, ha ha ha. And we've already revealed how that goes.
Yeah.
That's how the Doctor is able to prove to them that, they're being, taken advantage of by these outside forces. And the governor is like, hey, you've proven to us that we actually have a very valuable mineral. We're gonna start negotiating with multiple people. They never really tell how, like, this one wormy guy, and I say that because he's literally like a space worm.
I mean, he does come back in the Trial of a Time Lord, but that's a different story for a different day.
Yeah. But I mean, they never really tell how, like, this planet fell under the I kind of have like a weird little idea. Maybe they told in a different part of Doctor Who canon somewhere how this planet came to be or whatever. But I mean, they do say that it was a prison planet and then it was just kind of forgotten about or something and evolved into this state, basically using the tools the prison colony used, and it just kept going. I kind of wonder if, like, they didn't, like, the Sills people didn't, like, find this planet, and whoever ended up in charge was one of the, like, insane people that got sent there.
Who knows?
And they were like, we can control these people, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so they just kind of kept them perpetually imprisoned. Because they didn't really seem to have any, like, except for the governor and the top people, it didn't seem like anybody had, like, an outside line to the rest of the universe. Like, they seemed to know, the governor and them seemed to know that there were other planets, but they didn't seem to communicate with them, you know? Mm. So I kind of think that one corporation was just maybe keeping them imprisoned.
Keeping them in the dark of everything, you know, how much their mineral is really worth and how many mining companies are in the universe and whatnot. At the end of all of this, the governor makes one final ruling that there'll be no more executions and basically trying to have a more fair and balanced society versus what they had before, now that they're in communication with other worlds and other civilizations and other companies to sell their ore to.
Yeah, I mean, you're left with the idea that there's going to be a new system and that the governor and that the rebellion leader are going to work together to build a new system of government or something, you know.
Back in our TV watching family, the husband seems very depressed that there'll be no more executions on television, while the wife is saying, we're free. We're finally free from all of this. Are we, though? I think so.
And you just hear static in the background as the TV goes off, you know?
And yeah, that's Vengence on Varos, the second story of season 22 of Doctor Who. But the story really doesn't end there, at least for the show itself. We now need to talk about the head of the BBC at the time, a man named Michael Grade. Michael Grade had just become the head of the BBC, and he did not like Doctor Who. He is one of those people that felt that Doctor Who was past its prime. It's been on the show for it's been on the air for 22 years. It's time for something else. Also, he really wasn't a fan of science fiction in general, and he really wasn't a fan of things that wasn't making money, as everything we said before during Colin Baker's run was when Doctor Who had its lowest ratings. And that seemed to be enough to justify to Grade that maybe it's time to pull the plug on Doctor Who. So at the end of season 22, it was announced that Doctor Who would be canceled. There'd be no more show, no more nothing. And then all the Whovians came. He said, yeah, like hell there is. You're going to bring back Doctor Who. We will not stand for you canceling our show. So Gray grossly underestimated the number of Whovians that still wanted this show to continue, which leads us to a song that came out to try to get more attention and send to the BBC that Doctor Who should stay on the air. A little song called Doctor in Distress.
Doctor in distress. Let's all answer his SOS. Doctor in distress. Bring him back now, we won't take less.
Which featured Colin Baker and Nicola Bryant singing on the track. Nicola Bryant singing in her American accent. Do they know it's Christmas? This ain't.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this song is what eventually led to the actual cancellation of Doctor Who.
No offense to Colin Baker. Good actor. He's not a singer. But eventually a compromise was made. Doctor Who would be off the air for 18 months to allow for a retooling of the show, as well as allowing new projects to be airing on the BBC. 18 months later, season 23 comes and we get the Trial of a Time Lord, which also did not really set the world on fire. It had some cool moments. It had a nice little doctor speech from Colin Baker, but it wasn't enough to save the show. And after Trial of a Time Lord, Perry's exit during Trial of a Time Lord was a huge disservice. I don't even want to talk about it. Bald and having her mind wiped, and maybe she married a king, and I don't even know. We get the new companion, Mel Bush, who has no introduction. She's just, hey, here's a companion from your future. Her name is Mel, and now she's here now. And yeah. They were willing to bring back Doctor Who after Trial of a Time Lord and another year-long break under one condition. Fire Colin Baker. Because apparently all of the problems of Doctor Who, they wanted to blame on Colin Baker. To the point where they had several Doctor Who fans. Yes, there was a show called Open Air on the BBC. And they had a bunch of Doctor Who fans on there to voice their concerns about the series, their disappointments. They didn't like Colin Baker, they didn't like the scripts, they didn't like anything. One of the fans on this show was a young man by the name of Chris Chibnall. Yep. And young Chris Chibnall said that he didn't like the way that Doctor Who was going. That it was ridiculous storylines, ridiculous scripts, ridiculous monsters, and all in all, a very, very bad show.
And he didn't like that there were people writing ridiculous scripts and ridiculous monsters. He wanted to be the man writing ridiculous scripts and ridiculous monsters.
I was going to say, because those words ended up biting Chibnall in the ass.
Not quickly enough, because, man, the Torchwood fandom absolutely hated Chris Chibnall. We wanted him as far away from anything related to Doctor Who as we could get him. And then they put him in charge of the whole freaking thing. But we'll get to that later.
I'm just saying, all of the complaints that Chris Chibnall had about Colin Baker's run as the Doctor, you can put towards Jodie Whittaker's run. And
we will.
And it was no fault of either actor. And this is why I kind of wanted to do an audio adventure, because my own opinion, your opinion may differ, the television show did not allow Colin Baker to ever reach his full potential as the Doctor. My opinion. It was saved by these audio dramas. And I've listened to several of Colin Baker's audio dramas, and they're wonderful. And they really get it, and it allows Colin Baker to reach his full potential as the Doctor. And definitely save. And now in 2023, Colin Baker is considered for many to be their favorite Doctor because of those audio adventures, which makes me cross my fingers that hopefully Jodie Whittaker will get a chance to do the same.
Yeah, and the thing is that, like, I've said it before in other episodes, and I'll repeat it here. There is a hierarchy of who is to blame when something goes wrong in film or television. And it is many, many, many steps down before it gets to blaming an actor. And pretty much you have to look at something and go like, wow, everything else worked on this. And then there's just like one really bad actor,
Yeah.
But if you're looking at something and going like, the story was horrible and the directing was horrible and the sets were garbage and the writing was bad and and the actor was also bad, then it's like, well, then it's not the actor, like. So, it's obviously something went wrong way at the very tippy top, and it just kind of filtered down at that point.
I mean, there were already, even then, there were people calling for JNT's head. So, and he was the showrunner, so buck stopped at the top.
Yeah.
But they fired Colin Baker. They called him up. They fired him. And they offered him the opportunity to come in and film the regeneration scene for season 24. He counteroffered saying, hey, can I at least get the first story? To at least have one last story, one final adventure to properly write out this character. And they said, no. We just want you to come in and film the first 5 minutes of the episode for the regeneration, and then you can start off. And he told him to go to hell. I don't blame him.
Yeah.
So what we get is in the first part, 5 minutes of Time in the Ronnie, season 24 opener, is Sylvester McCoy in a bad wig, bumping his head off the TARDIS, and then regenerating into Sylvester McCoy.
Which, honestly, is sadly more than Sylvester McCoy got on the other end.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not blaming Sylvester McCoy for it, but it's a kind of what goes around comes around,
Yeah. So the next time we talk about Doctor Who, it will be the seventh Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, and the final Doctor of the classic series.
But I'm gonna say, despite all the problems, this is a better episode than some of the ones we watched.
Yeah, it is. And I think the 45-minute format helped matters.
Yeah, it really did.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, they were in a weird time for science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just a weird time for Doctor Who. It was a weird time for science fiction.
Especially when you have the competition coming from American imports. Not only are we talking Star Wars and E.T. and Close Encounters, but we're also talking about television shows like V and Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah. But I mean, this was also around the time when you start having stuff like Red Dwarf showing up
Mm-hmm.
in the UK. So I mean, it's right about the time when you start getting the BBC itself kind of mocking stuff like Doctor Who, you've got the people who grew up with Doctor Who. They're getting older, and I'm not sure that a lot of them are quite in the age yet that they're starting to have kids to pass it on to.
22 years, if you're...
I mean, they are, but this is the generation that's starting to have kids just slightly later,
Mm-hmm.
And so even the ones that are having kids are maybe their kids are not quite old enough to really be in that sweet spot for Doctor Who yet. Maybe the kids that are being born into that generation are wanting different things and are not grasping Doctor Who, because Doctor Who, when it aired, was such a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a new and different thing, and it was unlike anything else that was on TV right at that time. So if you wanted something like Doctor Who, all you had was Doctor Who. Whereas, by like 85, 86, if you wanted something like Doctor Who, you had options.
Yeah.
And in some respects, I hate to say it, you had slicker, better produced, more thoughtful options than what Doctor Who was giving you at the time.
And it says a lot because the head of the BBC is calling this show garbage and saying that why are you not like these other things, while at the same time not doing anything to give them the money to compete.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but just a few years before this, they're having some of the best writers in science fiction gravitating toward writing scripts for Doctor Who, and then now they're not, because they're not.
They're doing their own thing.
They're getting better offers elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, obviously there's been a breakdown at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Terry Nation at this point has already done Blake 7, and like you said, Red Dwarf was already on. So there was,
Douglas Adams has already found his niche elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's a little too early for them to have. I mean, by this point, like, your Neil Gaimans and stuff are getting into the writing biz, but they're not. I'm sure that Neil Gaiman in the mid 80s would have loved to have submitted scripts for Doctor Who, but I'm just not sure they would have,
And like we said, Chris Chibnall's a teenager.
Yeah, and Chris Chibnall's a teenager who wouldn't be there for another few years, and by that point, he's not. There's not going to be a place for him to submit a script. And also, maybe Chris Chibnall should have never been allowed to submit scripts for Doctor Who. I'm just saying.
A young Russell T Davies is writing Doctor Who fan fiction, trying to submit
as is a young David Tennant.
Yeah. I mean, he actually did submit a script.
Yeah,
he was just a kid, though.
Some of his Doctor Who fan fiction is in the DVD sets.
Yeah. One of them became an audio adventure.
Yeah, but I'm sure Peter Capaldi was out there writing Doctor Who fanfic too. I don't think we've ever read it. So
he was already doing other stuff. He was already acting.
Yeah, no, he was off playing in a punk band in Scotland somewhere, I think, at this point. But the there were people out there who they probably could have gotten of bigger name at the time, that people would have recognized, but they probably just weren't willing to pay the price point.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how previous showrunners wanted to get, bigger names and such in the guest thing, and not to discount. I mean, this episode had quite a guest cast, and we didn't really get into it. But like Martin Jarvis, who played the governor, has an incredible career. But they just weren't throwing the money at it. And I get that this was like Britain in the 80s, and the money just wasn't super there. But, you know, they could have done a little something more.
If they wanted to give this show the money they needed, they would have. It's just the head of the BBC wanted the show dead.
Yeah. Which is a shame, because as we see now, this is still one of the cultural linchpins of the BBC.
As for next week, it is Pride Month, and we have decided that our Pride Month episode is going to be about The Owl House. It is a show that has been suggested to us for a while, and since June is Pride Month, why not?
Yeah, it has been called one of the gayest things to have ever been made for the Disney Channel. So
As a compliment.
as a compliment. And so we're going to look at a show that everybody has called very groundbreaking on that front. In a world of Disney gays, let's talk about a show that actually put a bisexual character up front and in the main character position. So
yeah, come back for that as we enter The Owl House, and we'll talk to you all next time. Bye.
bye.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it. Podcasts are fun.
But there's work to be done.
We encourage you to get involved. Here are some organizations we support.
The American Civil Liberties Union fights for the constitutional rights of all Americans. Find them at aclu.org.
The National Network of Abortion Funds helps people find access to safe abortion services. Their site is abortionfunds.org.
The Trevor Project provides a 24/7 crisis helpline for LGBTQ youth and education services for schools on LGBTQ issues. They can be found at thetrevorproject.org.
Or find a way to help in your area. Is that good, or do you want to do a third round?
I think we can do that, and you can piece it together from the two.
All right, that sounds good. Let's stop the recording.